Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Okay.
What's the topic?
Even if I don't understand.
Welcome, everyone. In a continuation of our Chosen Generation that started yesterday, it was a great success. We had over 70 people here, many young people from all over the area, the local area, that traveled in and was with us. We had a great day. It was so exciting. Faith-building day for everyone. Bobby's going to pick up on the fifth lesson today, even if I don't understand. And at the worship hour, he's going to conclude it with our final lesson. So we're thankful for all the support yesterday, for all the young people. It was a great day to be had. So, Bobby?
All right, good morning. What time is the trap door? Is it 9:45? Yeah? Think that's right? Or just whenever the buzzer starts getting me, then that's when we'll know. All right. If you have a Bible and you want to turn with us today, we're going to be in, at least beginning in the book of Daniel in chapter 3. And while you guys are turning there, I'll give you, spend the first couple minutes just kind of giving you a rundown. If you were here yesterday, you got to hear kind of the origin of where we're at. Here's the downside of doing a Saturday and then a Sunday. You know, there's always pros and cons to your formats. When you do a Saturday to a Sunday, not everybody can make it, especially if it's geared towards younger people. And if you don't view yourself as younger anymore, or you've got a job, and so that means you're not younger anymore, then, you know, you're not there. And so I kind of need to do a little bit of a review so that you guys can go, oh, that's what he's talking about. Otherwise, I kind of jump in and keep going, and you guys, well, I didn't get the first part, and I didn't quite understand it. So if you'll let me do that this morning in Bible class just a little, and then I'm going to do it again a little bit in the sermon, just so we get everybody on the same page. And if you'll be patient with that way it'll kind of give us that same level set, so you don't feel totally disjointed from the material. Is that okay? If it's not, I'm going to do it anyway. So that's just so you know. But if I ask, it feels polite. So the phrase that we're coming to here, when Uncle Bob was talking with me, let me turn this thing on. Works when you turn it on, they say. Yep. Is the book of Daniel in chapter 16. You remember at the beginning of the book of Daniel, it kind of gives you this rundown where Daniel and his friends have been taken captive as the king of Babylon actually didn't even do it himself. He sent somebody else to come against Israel, and they have taken over Jerusalem, and they've burned the temple, and they've taken captives, and they left behind the poorer people to tend the land, but all of the noble people, wealthy people, folks that looked nice, they took them with them, and they actually began to change their names. And so these young people have been taken captives, and now they're servants in the King Nebuchadnezzar, before King Nebuchadnezzar. And in the earlier part of the book, you'll remember that there was they get to taste the king's fine things, the king's delicacies, and they are withholding themselves from those things. And so Daniel says, give them a test, let them only eat vegetables, and compare them to everybody else who's going to eat the finer things, and you'll see after 10 days who does better. I don't know about you, but if I was volunteering for that group, I would not have been in the vegetable group. I'll take my chances with the other stuff. That would have been me. But anyway, so they go on through that, and so when you get to chapter 3, now King Nebuchadnezzar sets up this idol. Let's read together in Daniel chapter 3. So Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and the width 6 cubits, and he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent word to the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces were assembled before the dedication of the image that that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And the herald loudly proclaimed, To you the command is given, O peoples, nations, and men of every language, that in the moment you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the tigron, the psaltery, bagpipes, and all kinds of worship, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into the midst of the furnace of a blazing fire. Therefore, at the time when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the tigron, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, the nations of men in every language fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So, in this big plain, he's set up this huge idol. Some would say that it's maybe a representation of a god there. Some would say that it's a representation of himself. Regardless, it's not something that the Jews would normally worship. And, excuse me, and so he's calling them to that. If you'll note, how many of you know what the prefects, right, with the list of dignitaries? We don't know. I don't know what those people are. I didn't live in that time. I just know that when he talks about any kind of dignitary or important person, they're all there from all over. Men of the herald says men of every language. So even if you needed an interpreter, you're there if you are any sort of dignitary. And the reason that you're there is not because of how important you are, but because of how important Nebuchadnezzar is. Okay, and he's going to make a show. And so then he says, and not only that, but when you hear the sound of all the, and you notice that again, the Bible lists all those musical instruments that are played. This isn't some small show. This is a grand public thing that is done. I don't want you to think that this is something that's done in a corner. This is a big deal. And so whenever it happens that this event happens, that everyone bows down except there's some certain Chaldeans, verse 8, that come forward and brought charges against the Jews. And they responded and said, King, live forever. You made this declaration that everyone that hears the sound of all these instruments, verse 10, should fall down and worship the golden statue. But whoever does not fall down will be cast into the furnace of blazing fire. But there have been certain Jews who you appointed in the administration over the province of Babylon, in other words, the capital, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. And so somebody's tattling. You guys remember somebody tattling on you when you were kids? Well, this is a big deal because it's not just that you're going to get grounded. It's a vendetta. Now, maybe they had some sort of ideal that they wanted to protect the gods, but it may be that they had something against the Jews. I don't know. But you look at verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar, enraged, gave an anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then these men were brought to the king, and the king responded and said to them. So now he's got him in presence. He says, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the moment that you hear the sound of all the instruments that he lays out, and to fall down and worship the image that I have made, very well. But if you will not worship, then you will immediately be cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of my hand? Now, that's pretty bold, isn't it? Not only does he say, listen, I'm the God of everything. I'm the person that's in control here. And I'm inviting you in, and if I want to kill you, that's up to me. And there is nobody, but not just nobody, there is no God that can rescue you out of my hand. And so he elevates himself to that position over Jehovah God, doesn't he? Here's what happens. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king. And notice that they don't say, O king, or most honored one. The text says that they use his name. Nebuchadnezzar, we are not in need of an answer to give you concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will rescue us out of your hand, O king. Can you imagine standing before the most powerful man on earth that commands all the armies that are conquering everybody? The Assyrians, it doesn't matter. He's beating everybody, and he's just called all these people to come and worship. And the reason that they worship wasn't because necessarily the God, but because they were in fear of their lives. And he says, why didn't you do it? In fact, I'm not even going to give you a chance to answer. Why don't you just go ahead and bow down, because nothing is going to save you from my hand anyway. And their answer is, hey, listen, Fred, if that's your name, we don't even have to give you an answer. But since we're standing here anyway, let me just go ahead and tell you that our God that we serve is going to take care of us, and he's going to rescue us out of your hand. That's pretty bold in and of itself, isn't it? I don't have to answer to you. That's something that a child says to its older sister, isn't it? You're not the boss of me. And that's exactly what they did. And by the way, you're not the boss of me, and my dad said that we don't have to do that. It's exactly the type of answer. But even greater. But even if he doesn't swoop in and save us, tell you what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is bow down and worship the gods that you've set up. How about that? This is the most defiant answer I think I can find in Scripture. If it's not, it's one of them. Because it is everything. It is not respectful. There's no honor and grace be to you, O King. There's no polish to it. It's, listen, Mr. First Name, if that is your first name, here's what we're going to do. And so, in their defiance, what I want to convey and what I wanted to convey to the young people is we want to try and build a faith that gets us to the point where we can say even if. Even if. Where we can have a faith in God that goes, listen, I don't know what's going to come towards me. And we talked about some of these things yesterday. Even if I've got baggage, even if I'm depressed, even if I'm alone, even if I'm afraid, that I can stand up and go, listen, I don't know what's coming at me, but I know that my God is going to deliver me out of those things. And even if he doesn't, I'm okay with that. I can walk through it. I don't know about you, but I'm trying to get my faith there. If I'm being honest, my faith needs to go more in that direction. Maybe there's some places where I feel like I'm there already, but there's some places I'm just not. And that's why we go over these things, right? When Paul writes to the church at Thessalonica, he goes, when it comes to brotherly love and kindness, nobody needs to explain these things to you, but I'm urging you to excel still more. It may be that for you this morning that you can get to that even if passage and you can plant your feet and go, even if I'm there. My encouragement to you in this study has just been to excel still more. But for those of you that aren't there, for those of us that are still working on that, these lessons have been for you. And so what I want to talk to you about this morning then is, when we talk about even if, it's even if I don't understand. And I saved this one particularly for an audience that had more adults in it, because I was hoping for some interaction, for some maybe some experiences. Okay, so I want to kind of set you up, those of you that aren't necessarily teenagers or young people, and those of you who have been through some things where you think, man, I really didn't understand that at the time, and I understand it better now. Because that's really kind of where we're going. How many of you have been in a moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to serve the Lord, but I don't know how we're going to get through this? Yeah? Okay, there's 3 or 4. That's okay. The rest of y'all get there. I think that even in the discussion among Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it says in the scripture that they answered. I don't know that they rehearsed it to the point where they all said in unison, but it was the heart of all of them. I wonder if there was some sort of back conversation. Now, guys, I don't know this, but there had to be at least some sort of conversation, maybe when they were smaller in their upbringing, maybe in the training that they had, as if they were there still with their mom and dad or aunts and uncles or whoever had spiritual influence over them, where they're like, listen, I know that they've changed your name. I know that your name means honorable things to their gods. They don't mean, it's not Azariah, Mishael, right? It's not Hananiah. It's not, that's not what they're calling you anymore. Okay? But there's going to be a day where you're going to have to stand up for your faith, and there's going to be a moment where you're going to have to make a decision. And when you get there, honey, it's going to be really hard. And in fact, they may even take away food from you. They may even take away some of these nice clothes that they give you. They may take away some of your position. They may even threaten your life. But listen, baby, even if they do that, you're going to have to stand up and say what's right. Even if that happens, somebody had to have that conversation with them, or they had to have that conversation among themselves. There's ever been somewhere with a group of friends and you're not sure about what's going to happen? So, okay, listen, when we get there, okay, if this happens, here's what we're going to do. But if that happens, here's what we're going to do. Right? And then nothing goes according to plan. Right? But you at least have that little conversation. I wonder if the three boys had that conversation on the way and says, all right, what are we going to do? Listen, guys, somebody speaks up. Listen, guys, I don't know what's going to happen, but here's what I do know. Regardless of what happens, I'm not bowing down to that image. I'm done. Now, I'll serve to the best of my ability to this man as a tribute to my God, but not to his. And I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know how we're going to be glorifying to God if we die. I don't know what that means to everybody else. In fact, I'm not completely sure that God's going to rescue us, because what has he done for us lately? Frankly, guys, we're still slaves. Our place was destroyed. We don't even have the place. If we could go home, what's home but a pile of rubble? Where could we worship even if we did go home? We don't have anything. So I'm not entirely sure I understand why we're supposed to stand up right now anyway, and yet this may be the moment. So if I'm going to be defiant, I'm going to be defiant, but I'm not bowing down. I've had enough. I've had enough. Even if we don't understand, how many of you have been in a situation where you're I don't understand what's next? Yeah? Talk to me a little bit about what that means to your faith, where you're like, I don't know what God's going to do next, but I trust him. How did you get there?
I don't know, Bobby, you're asking for some maybe very private, intimate details.
Maybe. I don't need all the gory details, and if that's too deep, that's too deep. Let me ask you it this way. How many of you feel like it was a difficult time getting there? Yeah? Let me do this, and let's see if we can circle back around to this. There are times that God leaves us to wonder. You go to Psalm 73, right? You don't have to turn there, but where the Psalm of Asaph, where he goes, my foot almost slipped, right? I almost sacrificed everything, because what happened? Well, I thought that I saw the eye of the wicked was being made fat. Everything that they did prospered. Their calves didn't die, right? Their crops always were fruitful. Everything that they did was fantastic, and they didn't have any problems. And so I said, if the wicked prosper, why in the world am I serving God? And so the psalmist writes about that. In Job chapter 10 and verse 4 and 5, Job writes, he goes, can you even see me? Do you have eyes of flesh? Here I am suffering. Everything is gone. My kids are gone. My servants are gone. My possessions are gone. You left me with my wife. Can you even see where I am? And he's wondering, where is God? How is it that God is glorified in this awful, awful situation where I'm covered in sores and I've got terrible counselors? There's got to be more than one person besides Job who has wondered, how is God with me in this awful moment? How is there a God when all these wicked people are making these fantastic choices, and that their bottom line gets richer and richer, and mine just seems to keep getting smaller and smaller? What about in Jonah's day? Jonah wonders actually about a good thing. Jonah is upset with God. Why? You remember why Jonah's upset with God? A couple reasons, but in the beginning he's mad at God because what does God call him to do? I'm sorry? Go preach to Nineveh. And is he mad because he's got to go to Nineveh? Or he doesn't want him to be saved. And he's like, why is it that God wants these people saved? And then in chapter 4, he's angry over a plant. Do you remember that? This plant that sprouts up, and poor Jonah's got a bald head, and he needs some shade, and he's like, why? Oh, I was so hot, and I'm mad because this plant's gone. Why did he take it away? And God says, listen, are you mad about this plant? You're mad about the plant dying? I'm mad that we can't save these people that don't know their right hand from their left, as well as many cattle and livestock. Yes, sir.
You know, I think, Bob, there is something that I could share, like right now, it's a current event that I'm actually struggling with, and that is, you know, we look at the Olympics that have just opened, and they were mocking the Last Supper
Sure.
with the most, you know, horrible, sinful abominations before God that you can imagine. And I think a lot of us wonder, I know I do, you know, it's like the people under the throne in Revelation, right? How long?
Sure. Absolutely.
How long will this go on? And there's frustration, I think, on our parts to see this kind of sin proliferating, not only across the world, but specifically in America. And we wanted to do something, and there's frustration about it, but we know that he does things in his time. And we know that he'll be silent until he decides not to be.
Sure.
He's really not silent, and we know that. But it's a frustrating thing to not be in the seat of control, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe other people have felt that recently.
Yeah. Anybody else frustrated with what goes on in the world and the wickedness of sin? Yeah, I mean, and we could sit all day and pick out different things and aspects about it. And what, you know, why does that happen? How long ago, oh Lord? I mean, the psalmist will even write at some point, and it escapes me now. He goes, I would that you would take the children of the wicked and dash their heads against the stones. You know, I mean, that's which makes me wonder about that. Just in general, and know we could pray that way. But yeah, I mean, it's just this. What is God doing? Right? How is this glorifying to God? And so there's this part of, I want to know everything that's going on, or at least what the outcome is. And it's frustrating. And I feel like I can't be the only one. And I can't imagine that these young men that are in that situation felt any differently. That they had to be upset about the things that were going on. That as they were worshiping, I think it was Marduk as the god of the Babylonians, that they didn't just have a fire set up for just any reason. I mean, there was child sacrifice going on. I mean, that's what those furnaces and such were for. So God leaves us to wonder. Do you remember in Luke 2 and verse 26, there was a prophet, and he couldn't die? He couldn't die until he saw Jesus. You remember that? And he holds the baby, and its prophecy then is about how he's, you know, this is the day of the Lord, that sort of thing. You ever wonder about that? I mean, some of our wonders aren't necessarily about wicked things. We just ponder things that are too great for us. You know, how is that a sign? Man, when's it, you know, at some point you start tapping your foot. Lord, how much wickedness do I have to watch before I finally see the salvation? What about the man born blind in John chapter 9 when the disciples asked, who sinned? Was it this man or was it his parents? It was this awful thing that somebody had to endure, that they were born blind. You know, they had to go through it. And Jesus says, well, listen, I know that doesn't sound like a good thing, but this was done. Why? Do you remember why he says that in John chapter 9? That God might be glorified. Wait a minute, this is a hard thing that people are going through so that you might be glorified. That doesn't sound right. Wouldn't it be glorifying for you if everything were easy? Go ahead, Tom.
I think that people had trouble answering your question earlier about even if. I don't think anything I've ever experienced has put me in a position to have to ever answer even if. I've never had some Muslim hold a knife to my throat and
Sure.
say, deny your God or I'll chop your head off. We have been blessed in this country. Nothing in my life has ever risen to that level. For me to be able to say that I've experienced something history have experienced.
That's a fair observation, Tom. That's a fair observation. Do you think, and this isn't just for Tom, but I'm looking at you right now, so I'll let you answer it. Do you think that has a positive effect or a negative effect on our resolve as Christians?
I think it makes us complacent. I think that's what Dan's comment about. We get angry and we don't know what to do because we're not going to go out and we're not going to start destroying cities and marching on other countries. In the past, they did that. I mean, maybe the Crusades were wrong, but at least they were angry that Jerusalem had gotten taken over by Muslims and they were going to take it back.
Sure.
We sit back and complain, but then we don't even speak up when somebody's advocating for evil in society. We just kind of like, if I say anything, I'm a hater. I'm just going to hold my tongue. And I'm wondering if God's like, no, this is your opportunity to stand and take a stand. And we just like, I don't want people to think badly of me.
How many of you identify with what he said? You find it hard in the smaller moments. Yeah? It's okay. You can nod your head. You can raise your hand like this if you want to. I guess that was kind of tough to raise your hand into small. If you have a hard time raising your hand and standing up, raise your hand. If you have a hard time, go like this. Just or maybe wink with one eye that nobody can see. I think that's part of it, like wondering what purpose does it serve? And I think that it comes to us, why do things happen? We wonder about these things. That came in out of order. I guess we wonder, I need to get this. Let me just put that up there. I see you. Well, let me take this off. I'll take your question. Go ahead.
Bobby, for more on a personal note, for those of us who have had serious illnesses or cancer, and get that diagnosis from the doctor, and your life flashes before your eyes, and all you think about is, oh no, what am I going to do? My family, what do I have to, this, and then you have to realize that God is in control, and prayer is what you have.
Yeah. It comes back to, this immense, I'm going to word this poorly, and you have such a powerful point. We have to find comfort in the sovereignty of God. Like, I think that's what ultimately, maybe we don't understand the sovereignty of God and we don't trust it because we don't understand the outcome of the tragedy. We don't understand why would God destroy Jerusalem? That doesn't make sense. Why would he carry off all the noble people? That doesn't make sense. Unless you go back and read, and he said, listen, my people have betrayed me, and now you'll go into captivity. We didn't listen to the prophets, did we? God called us back over and over again, and we didn't listen. And so now there's this consequence to that. So now we have to trust the next step. Well, God says that he's going to restore the nation. Well, we've got to wait on that thing yet. But, isn't that frustrating? Isn't that a frustrating process that if we begin to apply that to us today, if someone gets that diagnosis, well, we know within the sovereignty of God, our lives are unstable. Within the sovereignty of God, things happen to us. Things happen around us, then they're not always pretty. I mean, for the wide majority of time, people don't make it out alive. So there's going to be sicknesses and illnesses and deaths, and sometimes they're very wicked deaths, and sometimes they're very painful deaths that aren't necessarily wicked, just through the course of living. Sometimes people live a very painful life, and we just don't understand those things. And it's hard to wrestle with God. I see you. It's hard to wrestle with God, and the question of God being good and still having hard, evil, what we would call evil things or bad things happen. It's difficult for us. Yes, ma'am.
All of that is true, is real, and it's heavy. But don't forget Christ's word. He has overcome the world.
Yeah.
It is in those moments, those horrible moments, that our faith grows. Because we have to cling on. We have to stay fixed on Him. And we are equipped as His body. We are equipped for this moment. For this moment. So that the rest of the world can see light and see strength and the peace of Jesus.
Yes. And that's that even if, right? So even if the diagnosis is not what I want to do, even if it's, I don't understand how this is going to happen, right? That we can stand up in the face of whatever. So even if, I don't have to tell anybody why I think it's ungodly for people to stand up and act a fool on the worldwide television on a bridge in France. I don't have to tell anybody that. But since you asked, right, I think it's sinful. I don't think that's what God would have any of us do and be. Not one of us. And I would want everybody to stop. But even if it doesn't stop, right, and there's this even if, this that follows through with all of that. Uncle Bob.
There's so many things, challenges that we'll face in life, and some of the things we've discussed, sickness and things that are presented to us in life that we don't understand, we question, there's no answers. We recently experienced the loss of a baby.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that? There's no answers for it. But that's where the trust comes in our faith as far as God's concerned. These three young men didn't know what the finality of their life was presented to them. They stood up as young men and did what was right and lived and pursued the faith that they had. And that's the same faith that we have to have. God has given us the scriptures, examples before us of people, good, honest, strong people, and try and set a righteous example for us. God sees the whole picture and we don't, and that's the problem. We don't see the whole picture, but God does. And we've just got to have the faith to understand that He controls everything.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
These three young men were together, and they did it together. When we go through things, we need each other.
Sure.
God gave us each other to hold each other up. And if we don't have each other and God, we can't get through it.
Yeah, that's a difficult portion. We talked about that to some extent yesterday as we were winding down, that what would it have been like had it just been one of them? You'd love to say that their faith wouldn't have wavered, but there's something about having that three chord, or those three boys that could lock arms and at least somehow have that discussion. Look, I don't know what you guys are going to say, but this is how I feel. Yeah, man, that's it. Let's do it. And we're linking up together. Yes, ma'am.
Always go back to what God told Paul when he prayed to have the thorn removed from his side in 2 Corinthians 12. My grace is sufficient for you, and power is perfected in weakness.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about that in the sermon this morning, so I'm going to come back to that. I'm not overlooking it, but I got to preach again. So give me a second. Hold on. I am going to come to that. That's a good thought. Yes.
The psalmist in Psalm 131 addresses this in 3 verses, and he says that we're to be like an infant trust his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that I shouldn't concern myself with things that I can't understand.
Yeah.
And it's that faith that we have. We don't understand everything. It really says that neither do I concern myself with great matters nor with things too profound for
Yeah, I like that. I don't concern myself with great matters or things too profound. Yeah, there's some. It's okay for us to go. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm glad Claudette mentioned what she did, that scripture, because it, even in the face of my comment earlier, the nice thing that we have is this.
Yes.
We have this advantage, and sometimes we forget that there were spans of long periods of time where God didn't work, but we have this account of when he did and when he moved people to work. But at this point now, what do we have? John 14:16 says that Jesus prayed for that helper to come
Yes.
and be with us for how long? Forever.
Yeah.
And so we have the Holy Spirit who works in us and through us if we obey him.
Correct.
And so we don't have to worry about all these external things because we have that helper or that comforter that comforts us in times like that.
Yeah, and I guess that's ultimately where I'm trying to get to is it's one thing for us to sit in a Bible class or a time for us to be together and go, you know what? We can take comfort in knowing that God takes care of that. And in the moment of that pressure, it's a lot more difficult, isn't it? It's one thing to have the academic answer whenever we're sitting together and we've got our workbooks out and everybody's got their Bible and we're looking at it. You know, we got a nice PowerPoint and we're going to sing some songs and it's air conditioned even though it's 100 degrees outside. Listen, it's great. It's great. Let the power go off for a little while and let's sit in some heat for a minute and see how patient everybody is. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to wonder why the sermon's so long. And listen, you laugh, but it doesn't take much for us to get really wicked-minded, does it? I mean, listen, we're comfortable today. We don't need somebody to hold a gun to our head. We just need somebody to cut the AC off. Why, oh God, have you punished us? We got to be careful with that. I know that that's a bit dramatic, but I mean, we've complained to God about a lot of things that maybe we shouldn't have. Well, we've shown our first world problems in our Christianity. Well, let me kind of wind this down. I just have a couple minutes left. Often we don't understand it, and mostly it's because we aren't there yet. And I put there in quotes yet. Sometimes we're just not there in our faith. Okay? Sometimes we're just not there. Sometimes you have to go through something for you to have that moment where you go, oh, okay. There have been times with my kids where I'm like, okay, listen, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and then this is going to happen. And they're, okay. And you walk through it and they go, I didn't know that was going to happen. I said, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and this is going to happen. Oh. Well, it may have been on me that I didn't explain it very well. It could be on them that they didn't listen very well. It's likely on them that they didn't listen very well. Just like it was likely on me when someone explained it to me. But it could be that we're just not there yet. And that's part of the growth of faith. And so I want to encourage you this morning, if as we wind this thing down, if you're at a place of frustration where you're like, I just wonder why, and you have that frustration and that groaning in your spirit where you're just like, God, why? That is a natural place for you to be. One of the reasons I brought up all those other passages in Scripture was to show you that that's not something that just happens to you. You're not crazy. That is a natural frustration for all of us to go through in that moment of pressure where we don't understand how God's working yet, or we haven't reached the fullness of what it is that He's doing yet, that it is a natural place in your faith to be in frustration. I think sometimes we want to act like, well, when you have faith, you just kind of put a smile on your face and everything's easy. It's a growing aspect. It's a growing aspect. And there'll be times where you'll get to that point and you'll go, okay, all right. I know the Lord's going to take care of me. Let me walk through. Yes?
Sometimes we have to realize that Satan is part of the picture too, and that he may be testing us.
Correct. That's right. It could be very much a trial by Satan as well. And so I want you guys to be aware of that you may not be there yet, just you haven't walked through that yet. And once you walk through that, and so moments like these where you have someone just tell you, listen, you're going to walk through something difficult. Take that and wrap it up and make it a little snack, put it in your spiritual backpack and take it with you. And when you get hungry later and you're wondering, what can I do to sustain myself? Remember that there was this crazy guy that stood up one day in Bible class and said, you may reach a point of frustration and it's okay. Hang in there. You may wonder why. You may not understand exactly what's going on. That's naturally part of it. 2 minutes. Okay. I don't know why I had the other why there. Maybe I saved the wrong version of it. No, it's on me. It's a user error. Yeah, I'll own that. I want to kind of wrap this up just by saying this. It had to be a natural part of their conversation to go, we don't know what's going to happen. We wonder how God's going to rescue us. We don't know if he's going to stop us from going in the fire. We don't know if we're going in. At the time, they didn't know if it was going to get 7 times hotter. We don't know. But here's what we do know. And here's the resolve, and here's why I want your faith to get, and would that all of our faith get there. Even though I don't understand, even though things around me are crumbling, even though it looks like this is the end and I wonder how God's going to do it, I'm standing with him. And even if it doesn't happen the way I think it's going to or the way I think it should, I'm with him. That's the resolve of these men. And that's what I want you to take away this morning. We're good? I'll give you an extra minute off in the break. Thank you.